Hello and welcome to the midterm review of the project Establishing Sustainable Solutions to Cassava Disease in Mainland Southeast Asia. I'm Jonathan Newby, the Cassava Program Leader at CIAT and the project leader. I think we've all become very aware of the importance of cassava, both in terms of rural livelihoods and economic development in rural communities. The area of cassava has continued to expand, particularly in Laos, but also Cambodia. And the value of cassava exports is now the #1 agricultural commodity for Laos and an important contribution to GDP in Cambodia. In Vietnam, again, it's a billion-dollar export crop, and also Thailand, a multi-billion-dollar crop. At the same time as this expansion has occurred, diseases such as cassava witch's broom disease and cassava mosaic disease have continued to be a problem. Cassava witch's broom disease is found throughout the area, but at varying levels of field incidence depending on the season, with different impacts on fresh root yield and starch content. After a few years of being less common, the last few years have seen it really explode in certain parts, particularly of Laos and Cambodia. Cassava mosaic disease, that we know was first reported in Cambodia in 2015, is now present throughout the main producing areas of the region. That's Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, with several outbreaks now identified in Lao PDR. The aim of our project is to enhance smallholder livelihoods and economic development in mainland Southeast Asia by improving the resilience of cassava production systems and value chains by addressing this rapidly evolving disease situation. This regional plan has a history with consultation in Cambodia funded by the GCP21, ACR and RTB. This brought together experts and stakeholders from the region to discuss how we could address this problem together. Subsequently, with the support of ACR and the CRP, Roots, Tubers and Bananas, a project was developed with 4 main objectives. Firstly, putting business and sustainability and partnerships at the forefront. Objective 1 looks to assess the opportunities, challenges and risks for developing sustainable and regional solutions to cassava disease. Objective 2 seeks to enhance capacity and collaboration between the breeding programs of the region by introgressing sources of known resistance and novel resistance to both cassava mosaic disease and cassava witch's broom disease. Objective 3 seeks to develop, test and deploy diagnostic protocols, tools and information platforms fit for purpose in monitoring, surveillance and certification applications. And Objective 4 looks at developing technically feasible and economically sustainable seed system models for the dissemination of both new varieties and disease-free planting material to smallholders. More recently, we added a 5th objective to evaluate the impact of soil fertility on disease presence, and also to continue to develop with smallholders adoptable practices to manage soil fertility decline. The project has 3 key features. Firstly, the transdisciplinary nature of the research team working around packages. Secondly, the engagement with value chain actors, and we're very happy to have several of those actors dialing in with us through the next few days. And finally, the regional scale of the partnerships and networks. No one country can address cassava disease by itself, and again, we're very happy to have partners from both our partner countries and our support from countries such as Thailand, China, and India. The complexity of the project and the interdisciplinary nature is illustrated here in the design. Our Objective 1 in blue looks at markets, scenarios, partnerships, economic impact assessments, really putting the sustainability and business models at the forefront of what we do. In Objective 2, you can see the various sources of resistance that have been introduced to breeding programs. Objective 3 sees the work on diagnostics and surveillance, also feeding into the work on seed systems and the screening for resistance. And finally, the seed system and agronomy, where we take our products to farmers to have impact. Once again, I want to stress the regional research partnership that this project brings with our partners from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, receiving funding support from ACR in the conduct of activities. And secondly, our partners, again, from China, Thailand, and India, that are present with us today and interest in the regional approach despite not receiving any funding. Once again, we are very thankful for the support from ACR and in the past from the Roots, Tubers and Bananas CRP. The project aims to develop commercially competitive and acceptable cassava varieties resistant to CMD that produce higher yields than the existing varieties under disease pressure. It seeks to identify sources of cassava witch's-broom disease that can be introduced to cassava breeding programs, enhance the diagnostic tools and information platforms, develop models, and now for the seed system to reach farmers, and finally now to develop alternative cropping systems. The project got off to a flying start with an inception meeting held in Vientiane in September 2019. This was actually before the project was officially commissioned, with partners pre-funding a lot of the activities in these early days. This really set up the project to have impact early on. We thank all the partners who were able to do this, and it really shows in the results we're going to present in the coming few days. We're now in February in 2022, and it's time to take stock of where we have got to and the priorities for the next 18 months. The midterm review, unfortunately, is being conducted only virtually, but this has enabled us to include a number of stakeholders who would normally not be involved. The website provides a lot of information about the review, and all presentations will be uploaded. On the website, you can go to the MTR tab, and each day has a tab where you can access both presentations, but also discussion boards where you can add questions, comments, or upload any files that you want to share with the group. The structure of the day is Monday, overview and stakeholder engagement. Tuesday, we'll be looking at the diagnostics and surveillance work. On Wednesday, we'll be getting an update on the breeding and selection activities. On Thursday, we'll be looking at the agronomy and seed system work and the links to the business models that are being developed. And finally, on Friday, we'll be focusing on scaling and sustainability and the next steps that need to be taken. Once again, you can access the presentations, the live discussions that will be held from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. each day, Asia time, and the discussion boards. What I want to do now is just give a little bit of an update and the highlights so you can see what to expect on the coming days. Firstly, despite COVID, the market for cassava-based products has remained very strong, and this has pushed out the extensive margin further into countries such as Laos. You can see this year, cassava, as predicted, topped Laos agricultural exports. In Cambodia, it is also still one of the major export commodities and an important contribution to GDP. You can see in the graphs on the right that this year, cassava starch in Thailand and Vietnam reached all-time highs, indicating that, again, despite COVID, there was increasing demand for cassava starch in the region. The projects continue to monitor global prices, transport costs, and how they impact farm gate prices. This influences the direction routes move and the connectivity between actors, as well as the incentive to adopt new practices. China's demand, as always, really influences what's happening with prices. There's also the difference between the price in Vietnam and Thailand, which influences largely the flow of routes in Cambodia. We've continued to work on some of the outputs of the previous value chain project to identify how changes in market scenarios impact the flow of resources and the sustainability of different business models. You can hear more about this in the project on market developments. We've also continued to work with the University of Florida in terms of the seed exchange and risk mapping, which there is a presentation of uploaded on the website. The other activity that's been conducted in Component 1 is looking at farmers' willingness to pay for cassava stems of different quality status. Experimental auctions have been conducted in Laos and Cambodia with the help of NAFRI and CARDI. We're hoping to do these auctions in Vietnam in the coming months, especially now that new resistant varieties are available. As we turn to Component 3 on surveillance and diagnostics, a lot has been happening. The teams developed SOPs and conducted regional surveillance, which have all been reported on the information platform Pest Displace. You'll hear presentations from each of the country teams and see some of those results. In terms of outcomes, the first report and awareness raising have led to early detection and, in some cases, eradication of fields. Intervention in infected fields have been made possible through the use of rapid diagnostics, with the diagnostic droid from the University of Queensland team being used in the lab and in the field. One of the great successes were they were able to test some leaf sprouting on imported stems from Thailand and have them burnt and buried before they even were planted. I think this was a great outcome. One of the challenges does remain, once farmers have planted them, convincing them to eradicate a crop where they've already invested time and expect an outcome. We've been working with other projects to get information out to farmers through different platforms. In Laos, we've been partnering with the project Luras, and in Cambodia, we're doing a lot of work with the CAVAC project funded by DFAT. We were happy to see that some of our scientists from Laos and Vietnam were able to join and present at the Australasian Plant Pathology Conference in 2021. You can view their presentations on the website. In terms of Component 2, turning back to breeding, there's been a lot of things happening. Again, the transfer of genetic resources between continents and countries, I think, was a great outcome. We've seen material come to Asia from Africa, Latin America, and also through the Next Gen project, the botanical seed from Hawaii. This genetic material is now in Thailand, Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. New breeding techniques have been introduced, things like the flower induction that's now in Thailand and Vietnam, use of marker-assisted selection with the marker being validated, and also new management tools, so cassava-based, to manage the results to make sure we're getting the most out of data. You'll hear more of this on Wednesday. The multi-location trials that have started to be conducted in Vietnam are also informing what materials introduced to Thailand, Cambodia, and Laos. We've just received shipments of some resistant lines from headquarters into Laos and Cambodia based on the results that have been coming out of Vietnam. Again, the importance of the regional approach is illustrated here. In Vietnam, there have been releases of resistant varieties, 6 in total. 3 of these have come from the IATA material and 3 from the material that's come from SIAP. These are now being tested throughout the region and will be prioritized for different agroecological zones. In terms of seed system development, there's been some great achievements today. In terms of capacity building, I think there's been work both on the physical and human capacity within the labs, especially in Laos and Cambodia, who have been less familiar with cassava. We've also enhanced the connection between the labs, with material now flowing from AGI in Vietnam to Laos and Cambodia. We're also very happy to hear and see that the scientists from these labs frequently communicating about ways to improve what they're doing. The opening of the Rapid Multiplication Centre at NAFRI, known as FutureStems, by the Vice Minister of Agriculture and the Australian Ambassador was a big highlight from last year. In Cambodia, we're always happy to see that the Minister of Agriculture and the Director General of GDA have engaged with project staff and visited project activities. One of the real highlights has been the number of different partnerships that are developed in the multiplication of disease-free planting material. We now have partnerships with national governments, provincial governments, universities, and the private sector, and associations to multiply disease-free planting material. And in the coming months, this will also include some of the resistant material. We've also been able to introduce some new technologies into the seed system. Based on some discussion with some foresters and a visiting staff from the BCC company, we were able to discuss ways to improve the efficiency of the rapid multiplication. With the support of the USDA-funded Winrock Clean project with the Department of Agriculture, we were able to bring a FibreCell machine and test its applicability in the cassava sector and optimize that before it was handed over to the Laos Cassava Association. In order to scale up the rapid multiplication tunnels, extension material was developed, which includes a video on how to construct the tunnels, as well as a manual now in Lao, Khmer, and Vietnamese. We've been able to take this material to other development partners to see how they can scale it up through their own projects. Another highlight has been the linking of countries for the clean planting material for the mother plants that go into these tunnels. Obviously, it's more difficult to produce clean mother plants in Cambodia, so we've been producing mother plants within Laos and going through the appropriate phytosanitary processes, sending them to Cambodia. This has been a great achievement during a time of COVID when the national borders are essentially closed. Out of this, we've also seen the sale of both disease-free stems and plantlets to farmers and the private sector. After the experimental auctions, farmers, we arranged for the sale of clean planting material from one part of Laos into the area where CMD had arisen. This was a great achievement and involved our partner there, Kunsap, who facilitated the transportation and sale. Again, this was a sale and not a gift, so identifying that farmers are willing to pay for disease-free planting material. At NAFRI, they also sold some of the tunnel plantlets to a private sector partner who are now growing them and will multiply and distribute. So again, there's been many achievements throughout the past 2 years. You'll hear about these in the next 4 days. But everything we have done has been made possible through a number of partnerships. We do have our project partners, but the level of partnerships goes well beyond that, and we do thank everyone who's been involved. Please stay connected in the next 4 days and participate actively as much as you can, and also through our social media platforms. We really value your input and your opinions and advice. Thank you very much, and I hope we have a productive week of review. Thank you.